So let's dive right in. We have a healthcare system that I would not say is the envy of the world. We have a situation where our health outcomes are actually on the decline. And we yet spend a whole lot of money on healthcare in this country. And so we've done a lot of discussing in advance of this panel about what platform companies actually can present to help solve for that and give us better health outcomes. So what I want to do first is have each of our panelists just, kind of start the journey with us on what is their personal perspective. Why did they get into this work? Why do they think platform companies actually offer something that will be beneficial for healthcare? And I'm going to just turn to my left, Eric, and ask you to kick it off. What got you interested in doing this particular work at this particular time?
Yeah, thanks. So my path to healthcare was a bit unique. I had been in technology for 20 years and really never thought I would be in healthcare. But my wife was diagnosed with breast cancer about 4.5 years ago, and I was just perplexed at how little data had permeated her care. And at the time, we had started a bunch of other companies, and one of them was in the transportation space. And I used to say, it's crazy that we're giving better technology to truck drivers picking up pallets of water bottles than we are to doctors making life and death decisions. And so the question for me was at that time really why. And the more I dug into it as a patient advocate, the more it became apparent that a lot of the technology kind of ills that had existed didn't need to exist in today's day and age. That a series of underlying currents had occurred, cloud computing, artificial intelligence in terms of imagery, the reduction of the cost of generating molecular data. There are all these kind of tectonic shifts in how we can generate data and the cost at which we can generate data that all of a sudden make it possible to produce data sets, the kind of data sets you would need for any form of real artificial intelligence or augmented intelligence or machine learning to enter the space. And so once you kind of become aware of that, as somebody who's in it, you're just compelled to make that happen. And at least for me, the stage we're at in that journey is it's going to take a series of companies like Tempus, and we now have about 30% of all cancer patients in the US coming through Tempus. It's going to take a series of companies like ours kind of cleaning up this data, generating the data, structuring phenotypic and morphologic and molecular data at scale to allow bigger companies that have just a vast array of resources that even Tempus at 700 people doesn't have. It's going to take people like us, I think, doing some of that legwork to allow the really amazing technology companies and other companies to take advantage of it.
Kind of the opening question around, are large companies actually going to be required to do this disintermediation? Are you the only ones who can do it? Are there other players? Why hasn't it happened before? Is this going to be kind of this, battle of Winterfell, if I have any Game of Thrones watchers out there? Is this the battle of the Goliaths? Eric, you want to start with that?
Yeah, I think just by virtue of this panel itself, you can see most large companies are certainly thinking about healthcare. It's $3 trillion in the U.S. alone. It's the largest part of our global economy. The amount of, by many, most people think there's about somewhere between 25% and a third of all healthcare is inefficient. And so in theory, there could be $1 trillion of free cash flow up for grabs. And so I think you'll see a lot of big companies be increasingly focused on healthcare. And I think certainly the big platform companies in technology have been thinking about healthcare for a long time, and I'm sure in retail as well. The challenge has been historically that it's been difficult for these companies to break in and have an impact, in large part because of regulation, in large part because it was a closed system, data's been siloed, care is dispensed a certain way. It just hasn't been an easy space to break into. And so if you look at technology and its effect on most industries, our lives have been transformed and those industries have been transformed by technology. And yet that same underlying technology has not really made its way in mass into healthcare. But I think that is coming. At least what we've seen at Tempus, at least as one indicator, is that for the first time ever, you have in mass institutions willing to share data and to rely on technology in an augmented capacity in ways that I think were impossible historically. When just one anecdote, when we started Tempus 3.5 years ago, if you'd have said to me today, there are 70 NCI cancer centers, how many NCI cancer centers will be giving you data? I would have said 2. maybe 3, not 53 of the 70. And we see the same thing. We just migrated into diabetes and depression, and we see for the first time the same phenomenon where people are basically saying, we can't manage the data, we can't manage the variables, too much change, too quick. And so we're finally willing to embrace new technologies. I think it's like a dam. We talked about this yesterday in our meeting. It's a bit like a dam. Once the dam begins to break and you have little water shooting through, it's just a matter of time. And we saw this in entertainment, we saw it in cable, we saw it in automotive, we pick an industry, we've seen it. And I think you're about to see the same thing in healthcare. So I think if we have this panel 10 years from now, my guess is not what's the role of big companies in healthcare. They will dominate healthcare in ways that they probably should.
Right. Well, so let's talk, before we go to questions from the audience, about how will all of this ultimately benefit the patient? Because we're already giving a lot of our information away anyway in our consumer behavior. You talked about these very personal things that people are using search tools to understand more deeply. Are we concerned about privacy, or do you think that, back to Marcus's points, we're willing to say, take whatever you want as long as I'm getting something better and I'm something's more efficient? I'll start with you.
I think, look, everyone's worried about privacy. The good news, I think, is that the system is so messed up that people are willing to share data en masse to improve outcomes. And I think you're going to see the improvement. It's all about how this thing unfolds. The biggest improvements will be, I think, in the short term in prevention and clinical decision support when things go really awry. And that's where introducing technology and data to a system is all about pattern recognition, and those patterns tend to be, it's like, you have to look for big patterns before you look for small patterns. And so we're at the stage in the arc of this curve where you're going to bring tons of data to a system that has not had data, and we're going to mine that data for the single greatest benefit. That benefit probably is on both ends of the barbell. We'll keep people healthy longer, and we'll help doctors make really good decisions when things go badly. And then as that data begins to propagate throughout the entire system, and I do think patients will share that data freely if it's leading to better outcomes, you'll have this democratization of who can get into healthcare, and you'll likely have new models. Those models might be a McDonald's of healthcare. They might be technology comes that administer healthcare through the nanny. But we're all kind of saying the same thing, but time is the deciding factor here. Like, you probably won't see a McDonald's of healthcare in 3 years. You probably will see new data, algorithms guiding care, improving prevention in ways that are like a big deal. And these things will show up, and they'll be in market much faster than you will see a holistic change to a system that is massive, highly regulated, very entrenched. So it's unlikely that you're going to kind of turn over MD Anderson and Sloan and Northwestern and Harvard and Mayo and overnight.
I think it's